Welcome to Hurry Up Pinball, a show where I teach you how to work on your pinball machine. Today I will show you how to fix the sticky flippers on Pinball Brothers Alien. So grab your tools and let's get going. After playing about 50 games of my new Alien pinball machine, I noticed the flippers would get hung up on occasion. Here you can see that the flippers hesitate to return to their resting position. There is a return spring on the flippers, and I did check to make sure there was a tiny gap between the bushing and the flipper. I noticed this issue on all 4 flippers. After investigating the issue further, it appears the bushing is a bit rough and the flipper back gets hung up when returning to the resting position, even though there is a small gap between the bushing and the flipper bat. Here is a look at the upper left flipper after completing the fix seen in this video. No more hang-ups, and the flipper quickly returns to the resting position. To begin, unplug the pinball machine, open the coin door, remove the lockdown bar, close the coin door, and remove the playfield glass. If you need to, move the pinball machine so you have access to the sides of the pinball cabinet. If you have cabinet protectors, install them at this time, then partially raise the playfield, rest it on the support brackets, and remove the pinballs from the machine. With the pinballs removed, raise the playfield to the full upright position. Pinball Brothers has a unique rail system that allows the playfield to stand up straight while you work on it. Starting with the upper right flipper, unplug the Molex connector for the flipper coil. Next, remove one side of the coil return spring and then use your Allen key and a metric nut driver to loosen the bolt that holds the flipper bat in place. With one hand on the flipper bat and one hand on the plunger linkage, wiggle the flipper bat shaft free from the flipper plunger mech. It is not necessary to remove the flipper bat from the playfield. Now use your metric nut driver and remove the 5 screws holding on the flipper mech. This will allow you to completely remove the mech for the next step for this fix. Here is a look at the bushing for the flipper mech. We will be using 150 grit sandpaper on a sanding block to smooth out the rough edges of the bushing on the top and the bottom. Using your sanding block, gently sand the flat part of the flipper bushing. You do not want to remove a bunch of material. You are only trying to smooth it out. After smoothing out the flat part of the flipper bushing, I gently angle sanded around the outside of the bushing. With the top side sanded, turn over the flipper mech and gently smooth out the flipper bushing on the bottom as well. Again, you do not want to remove a bunch of material. You just want to smooth out the surface of the bushing where the flipper bat touches it. If you end up with a little residue on the inside of the bushing, use an X-Acto knife to remove the material. Here is how the top and bottom should look once smoothed out. Now take the flipper mech back to the pinball machine and reinstall it using the 5 metric screws you previously removed. I like to give the screws a little counterclockwise turn before tightening down the screws. This allows the screws to find the grooves in the wood and help preserve the screw holes. When reinstalling the flipper mech, be sure to insert the flipper bat shaft into the flipper mech since the upper right flipper has a wire form in the way and we did not completely remove it. With the flipper mech installed, insert the flipper bat shaft into the plunger linkage mech as far as it will go, and then gently slide the flipper bat up a tiny bit so there is a very small gap between the bushing and the flipper bat on the top of the playfield. This gap should be roughly about the thickness of a business card. You want to have a small space between the flipper bat and the bushing. Since the playfield stands straight up, you can check the alignment of the flipper bat on the top of the playfield. Remember to hold the flipper plunger mech in the resting position while aligning the flipper. If you need to, hook the return spring to the flipper mech to assist with keeping the linkage in place. Once the flipper bat is properly aligned, remove one side of the return spring, then grab your Allen key and metric nut driver and tighten down the nut that holds the flipper shaft in place. You want the nut to be really snug, but not so tight that it bends the screw. Make sure that you have a small bit of play between the bushing and the flipper bat before tightening down the nut. With the flipper mech reinstalled, go ahead and reconnect the Molex connector for the coil. Now completely lower the playfield and double check that the flipper is not getting hung up. As you can see here, the flipper mech is no longer getting hung up on the bushing. If you plan on completing this fix for the main flippers as well, I recommend placing the playfield on the rails and working on the flippers from underneath the playfield. Repeat this process for both flippers. Don't forget to unplug the Molex connectors for the flipper coils and make sure to leave a small gap and properly align the flippers before tightening down the nut for the flipper shaft. Also make sure to remove and install one side of the return spring during this process. This process is identical for all 4 flippers. Although I do not show it here, be sure to smooth the top and bottom of the flipper bushing for each flipper. With the flippers addressed, completely lower the playfield and double check that there is a small gap and that the flippers return easily to the resting position. Here you can see there is no more hang-ups on the lower flippers. If everything looks good, reinstall the pinballs, remove the cabinet protectors, reinstall the playfield glass and lockdown bar, and return the pinball machine to its original position. At this time, plug in the pinball machine and turn it on. After it boots up, play a few test games to double check your work. This is Craig with Hurry Up Pinball, and I wanted to say thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, show your support for Hurry Up Pinball and click the subscribe button. We can also be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under Hurry Up Pinball.